Hey guys, and welcome back to another CB Show Tunes tutorial. Now, I recently was made aware that our animation side of our previous tutorial about setting up our characters' bow animations was a little bit confusing. So we're going to go a little bit slower inside this part because there are a lot of moving components, and yeah, looking at the other video, it was very, very confusing. So what we're going to do is we're going to take it really, really slow. So to start out with, this video is specifically on the animator itself. Now, what we're going to be doing with the animator is essentially going to be setting up multiple states to be able to work with. So the first thing that you need is a layer state. Now, these layer states, you're going to automatically start out with a base layer. And you'll notice it's on the layer tab. So the base layer is going to be anything that's going to be happening in the beginning. Basically everything that's going to be going on, whether it's your motion, your jumping, your swimming, all that's going to be happening in your base layer. Now the next part would be, say for instance, your weapons. So as you can see right here, I created a new layer. And to create a new layer is just like creating a new parameter. All you're going to do is press this plus button. Now this plus button gives you the option to create this new layer. You can double click on that and just simply type in a name called new name or whatever. And then of course, if you click on this clog, just like any clog inside of Unity, it gives you other options based on whatever that object is. Now a layer option gives you the option to have a weight measure, which gives you pretty much a point to say, okay, so 0 means that this layer has no effect on the base layer or on the game object. While if it's closer to 1, it's going to have more of effect on the game object. Then you have a mask. Now masks are like, I guess you could say they're things that either allows you to be able to interact or use compared to not allowing you to use. So if you ever did 3D modeling or say for instance like a shadow, right? So anything within the shadow you can see, but anything without the shadow you can't see. So like shadow puppets, I guess you could say. Now, a layer mask works similarly the same. So you're looking at shining a light on your hand. So it's going to be shining a reflection of your hand onto that wall. Now a mask is only going to activate or use whatever that shadow is covering. Okay, so whenever we set up our layer mask, sort of like our weapon equipped, when we set this up inside of our mask right here, right there, the avatar mask. Whenever we set this up inside the previous tutorial, this right here, this avatar mask, we essentially cut off all of these layers. So anything from the mesh to the hips, and the only thing that we're controlling is from spine 1 down. Which means that on our player, if I actually open up our player, we're not controlling anything above this. But anything below this, we're able to change from this base layer to this bow and arrow layer. Now, with this blending is very, very important because if you change things to additive or override, it can have different effects. So let's go and test that out real fast. We're going to go ahead and select this clog on our bow and arrow. And I'm going to go change it to additive. Now if I press play on this game object, or on this game, what you're going to see is something completely different from what we had. So if you notice, our character's hands are really weird. If we go to aim, it's going to do this right here, and then it's just going to switch off, just like that, because it's adding our states together, so our base state and our bow state. And it just doesn't look that great. And that's the main reason why we actually use the override method here. Because what we're doing is we're simply overriding the original animation. So if I press play again, you're going to notice that our character now is able to look normal. And then of course if we activate our animation, our override animation, you could see that it's going to be following along. Now, what we have with our, if we add it here right now, so sync. Sync is pretty much just syncing these layers together. Now, if you think about it like this, I guess you could say mixing water and oil into one container, right? It doesn't really blend well, but it can if you have the right amount. So, water basically being on the inside and oil being on the outside. It's sort of like making a waterproof bowl. Now, we normally do not use this at all, or at least I don't normally use this. But if you want to use it for a particular reason, you found a reason for it, then by all means do so. There's a lot of experimenting whenever you are working with animators and programming. Just make sure that you experiment and work with it the best way you can. IK pass is the same thing. If you just hover your mouse over it, it will tell you what it does as well. Like, it basically says when active, the layer will have an IK pass, and it basically allows you to be able to use the IK on it. Timing is essentially just the same stuff, okay? It's just synced with your sync. So you could be like, okay, this is going to be one frame ahead. It's going to be the same as the other frame. It's, whatever. This one and this one and this one I rarely ever use, but, if you want to use it for any reason, then by all means, okay? All right, so to explain how we did this right here, we basically created a empty game object. So as you can see, an empty game object, or empty animation state. We renamed this state as default. Now, this default state is essentially just a base state. It doesn't really do anything. It's just here just in case we want to switch it back to null, or basically no animation. Then we're going to create a new state, which is our aim, hold, and attack. So we're going to just simply create our states empty. We're going to duplicate these by pressing Control D, and we're going to do it one more time. So I think I did it too many times, yeah. So the first one is going to be our aim state. So we're just going to call this aim. Then we're going to go over here. This is going to be our hold state. So we're going to call this hold. Then we're going to have our attack states. We're going to call that attack. Now from there, we're going to simply attach things up. So we're going to make our transition here, make our transition here, make our transition here, and make our transition from any state to here. And that's all you're doing. So essentially, you're now going to select, or not essentially, blah, blah, blah. I normally just say that just to have a filler word. Okay, so we're going to select this transition right here. Find the settings, and we're going to change the transition duration to 0.1. This slows down the duration of this transition, allowing it to be faster. Then you're going to add a condition, and with this condition, you're going to say if is aiming is equal to false. Next, you're going to select this right here, and you're going to set this as is aiming is equal to true. So as you can see, we're going from default to is aiming. Now, one thing that we want to do here is we want to check has exit time as false. The reason for this is because when we're heading from our default state to our aim state, this is the part where we're just going to be saying, okay, if we're aiming, we need to switch immediately. If we're not aiming, we're going to switch back immediately. So we're going to do the same thing here. Has exit time, it doesn't really have it. See that? Now, to go from our aim to hold, we're basically going to need to finish our aim setting. So we're going to make sure that this does have has exit time. We also want to speed up this animation, but for now, since we don't actually have an animation on this, we're not allowed to do that. So we're going to just leave it as so. Actually, we can. We're just going to select our aim, and we're going to select that as 2. We're also going to do the same thing to our hold. We're going to speed that up to 2. And then, of course, we're going to select this transition from hold to attack. Now, for this transition to happen, you're going to simply go to attack and take has exit time off. And that's all you do. So that is essentially the entire setup for our bow and arrow script. Now that we do have the one other thing, I almost forgot, making the transition back to aim from attack. So if you right click, make transition back to aim. And what this transition does is we're going to have it say, okay, we're going to go back to is aiming if is aiming is equal to true. And we also make sure that has exit time is equal to true as well because we want it to finish the attack. Okay? So once you have all that set up, your animator is done. You know, it's completely fixed. Now we're going to cover one more thing, which of course is our animator override component. Now I briefly went over this inside the previous video. I did go by really fast, so to explain in detail, an animator controller allows us to be able to run our characters' animations with a set amount of parameters. So what you see here, this is our animator controller. Now for our animator controller to be able to be switched at runtime, we need to be able to create an animator override controller, which allows us to do that. Now, I don't know why they don't allow us to switch out these normal animator controllers, but it's just what they do. And so you have to use an animator override controller, so that way we can be able to say, okay, I want to have a bow and arrow or an archer, I want to have a swordsman, I want to have a rogue. And each one has a different animation set. So this way, you're able to select this animator override controller and call it whatever you want it to call it, and then give it the default, which is your player, and then change the animations based on that. So you're going to notice that we have all these original animations. You have aim, idle, attack, in, jump, equip, bow, idle, whatever, right? Each one has their specific setup, right? Now, for this to work properly, you have to have every single one of these original ones to have, or original states to have a animation inside it. Because what happens is that if you don't have an animation within these states, these override components will not take them as actual animations. They will just sit there and be like, oh, there's no animation there, I guess it's not an animation state, and it will skip it. So the trick to do this is you simply need to fill it with an actual animation. So as you can see, I put equip bow. It doesn't need to be named equip bow. It can just be any animation that you have. Just be sure to name it something that sounds familiar. So basically, if it's default, you can put whatever you want there. If it's attack, make sure that it's like called attack. If it's hold, make sure that it's like aim something. If it's just aiming, you know, aim. If it's inside your base layers, see your motion, so you have running, walking, idle, walking backwards, running backwards, etc. You always want to name it something that is understandable, so whenever you create these override components, you'll be able to read it and then be like, okay, yeah, I can do that. I can change it to what I need it to be. So in other words, our walking animation can be changed from our normal walking to our archer walking. Now I didn't rename my archer walking different, so let's go over to our archery animation. Now this I got from mixmode.com, and I believe I covered that inside a previous tutorial. I did leave a link inside the description, but basically once I downloaded the archer pack, I simply was searching through all these things. Now what you want to do is find like the walking forward. So if we go over here, we're going to say standing walk forward. So as you can see, that's the animation for our walking method. But the problem is that if we try to select this animation, it's going to take away our animator override component. So what we need to do is go back to where we stored that, and you're going to select it, then find this little lock tab. You're going to select that, that way this is not going to change. This is going to stay constant. Now we can go back over to our archery, and then we're going to find our walking forward. So we can open that up now, and we could just simply click, drag, and drop on walking right there. Now keep in mind, if this is not named that, because normally if you download like the Pro Packs, it's going to give it a specific name. So I'm going to open up a brand new inspector. So we're going to add tab inspector. And let's just put this on the side right here. Now normally if you download the packs, it's going to give all the names as Mixamo. It's just going to be like Mixamo, Mixamo, Mixamo on the animations right there. And you don't want all of these right here to be named Mixamo. That just doesn't work. So what you want to do is find your animation. So walking forward, you're going to roll down. See how it says walking forward? You're going to find the animation tab. You're going to roll down to that. find the name of the animation. So it should be right below where it says clips. You're going to simply select it, change the name to whatever you want it to be. Then you're going to decide whether it is a loop time and loop pose situation. So if we actually press play here, and we take off loop pose, as you can see, our character is actually walking forward. This is really good for root motion, but it's not good for our particular setup, because our setup is based on a transition movement, which means our code is going to be controlling us. So we set this to loop pose, that way our character is not actually moving. On top of that, we also have it set to loop time. That way our character is capable of repeating this motion over and over again. And of course, we did the same thing with walking backwards. Oh, make sure to select apply. But we did the same thing with walking backwards. We did the same with our strafe, walk right, walk left, and so on. And all you have to do once you change that is simply drag and drop that animation where you want it to be. Okay, so let's go and close that up. So pretty much, the only thing that you really need to worry about whenever you are setting up this script or setting up this animation and animators is you want to be able to import your animations, make sure that you change the name of your animations. So let's go and do that. Make sure that you can go over here, go to animation tab, find where the animation is, rename it, then set it whether or not it's a loop time or loop pose. Then you're going to make sure that all of this is set up properly. So your parameters are set up to where you have a specific parameter that it matches with your script. You have your layers, so your base layer, your bow and arrow layer. And you also want to be able to make sure that you do have your override components, so right here. And you want your avatar mask. So I didn't really show you guys how to create that. Just go over to avatar mask, select, and create. And you need to make sure that your avatar mask are locked properly to import your skeleton, to be able to lock off what you want, and then of course select what you want to use. And that's all you really need. Import skeleton, and boom, done. Alright, I hope this was very helpful for those of you that had questions on the previous video. Make sure that if this wasn't clear enough that I'll know, so then I can go ahead and clear it up a little bit easier for you guys to understand. I know that was a lot of information going through. Now, with the controls and all, I know these are very, very small. But if I just roll right through here so you guys can just see how everything is, just in case you guys want to just copy the script from here, or you can copy it from the comment section inside the previous video. This script just works really, really well, and of course we will cover more about it inside the next tutorial because we have a lot to work on as well. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, check out some other videos. If you have a question, leave that inside the comment section below, and I'll see you guys next time.